Every character in the Invincible universe has a bizarre perspective of seeing things, and among them Omniman is one of the very few characters who changed a lot throughout the story, and his way of seeing the world around him changed drastically, and seeing the world of Invincible from his perspective would be very interesting. So imagine being born as a Viltrumite on the planet Viltrum, a world forged in strength and sharpened by blood. Your people didn't evolve through cooperation, but through conquest. When the time came, your society cleansed itself, casting out the weak in a purge that annihilated half your race. Only the strongest survived, and you were among them, molded not just by biology, but by ideology. The path was clear from the start. The Viltrum Empire would rule the galaxy, and you would be one of its instruments. You rose through the ranks swiftly, part of a generation of warriors who expanded the Empire's reach across the stars. Planet after planet fell under your command. The process was efficient. Identify civilizations advanced enough to be useful, but not strong enough to resist. They were offered submission in exchange for Viltrumite technology, or faced complete destruction. Some races submitted so willingly that they even lent their own armies to your cause, further feeding the machine of conquest. Eventually, the empire grew so vast that expansion could no longer be sustained by brute force alone. The galaxy needed control, not just conquests. Viltrum turned to a more measured strategy: deep infiltration. Trusted warriors were sent out alone to distant planets, ordered to blend in, observe, and prepare their worlds for eventual assimilation. You were chosen as one of the first to carry out this mission. Your destination: Earth. At first, Earth seemed chaotic and unworthy. Its people were emotional, inconsistent, and divided in every conceivable way. You were disturbed by its disorder, its diversity, a stark contrast to the disciplined unity of Viltrum. Worse yet, the planet was plagued by unpredictable threats. Beings of immense power, both native and alien. You hadn't anticipated this level of resistance, and soon you found yourself intervening constantly to neutralize danger. It became your cover. You adopted the identity of Omniman, Earth's greatest protector. In time, something changed. You met a woman, Debbie, a human. Through her, you began to understand more about the species you were meant to subjugate. To truly study them, you believed you had to live as one of them. So you did. You became Nolan Grayson, a writer, a husband. You created a human life and embraced it well enough to be convincing, even to yourself. Then Mark was born, your son, half Viltrumite, half human. You watched him closely, unsure of what would emerge. Years passed, and he showed no signs of your power. Still, you prepared him, carefully planting the seeds for a future you knew would come. When his abilities finally surfaced, everything changed. The mission, which had long been a quiet undercurrent, surged to the forefront. You acted swiftly. The Guardians of the Globe, Earth's most powerful defenders, stood in your way, so you eliminated them one by one in secret. It was a calculated strike meant to pave the way for Earth's submission. For a time, no one suspected you. The world mourned its heroes, unaware that its greatest one had turned against them. But secrets never stay buried. One of the Guardians, the Immortal, returned, and your past came crashing into the present. You killed him again, but this time your son saw everything. The truth unraveled in front of him. He learned what you were, why you were here, and what you intended for the planet he called home. You revealed your mission to him, expecting understanding, perhaps even loyalty, but he resisted. He rejected everything: your legacy, your vision, your empire. He chose Earth. You fought him. As a warrior, you had no choice. As a father, you hesitated. Blow after blow, you broke his body, but you couldn't break his will. And when the moment came, the moment to end him, you faltered. You fled, leaving behind a son battered but unbroken, and a mission unfinished. After your disappearance, Earth buried you with lies. Cecil Stedman, ever the tactician, orchestrated a cover story, a car accident, a tragic death. Your books became posthumous bestsellers, a final gift to the family you left behind. He stepped in as protector, caretaker, and manipulator. He even gave Mark your old position, ensuring the mantle of Earth's champion remained filled. But your story didn't end there, because deep within you, beneath the duty, beneath the pain, remained a conflict unresolved. You had failed your empire, you had failed your family, and now, torn between two worlds, you would have to decide what kind of legacy you truly wish to leave behind. After fleeing Earth, you realized there was no going back. Not to the empire, not to the mission, not to the world you had tried to shape. In their eyes, you had failed. You had chosen mercy over strength, love over duty. That choice had made you a traitor. Viltrumites did not forgive weakness, they erased it, but you weren't ready to surrender. Not yet. Somewhere inside, there was still a flicker of loyalty to the Empire, or maybe it was desperation to survive. You wandered the galaxy, searching for a planet to conquer, something to offer as penance, something that might lessen your punishment, anything to delay the inevitable. You found it soon enough, a planet of humanoid insects, intelligent but short-lived. Their entire civilizations turned over in months. To them, your power and your age made you a god. They welcomed you, revered you. You didn't need to conquer them. They handed you control. You became ruler of their world. It didn't take long for you to settle into that role. You even started over. You found companionship in Undressa, and once again, you became a father. Your son Oliver was born, another hybrid like Mark, though his skin bore a purple hue. You loved him, but you knew what he represented in the eyes of the Empire. Imperfection, a sentence of death. You had run out of time. You summoned Mark to Thraxa, hoping he could protect his brother. The Viltrumites would come, and when they did, you wouldn't be able to stop them alone. You explained everything to your son, and as if summoned by fate, they arrived. The battle was brutal. They weren't there to conquer, they were there to punish. They slaughtered Thraxa's population with surgical cruelty, not out of strategy, but to wound you emotionally. You and Mark fought back. 5 Viltrumites clashed across the sky. Flesh tore, bones shattered, and in the end, all of you lay broken. When you awoke, you were bound and surrounded. The Empire had you now. Mark, however, was spared. They saw something in him. Loyalty, perhaps. Potential, definitely. They gave him your mission. Earth would still fall under Viltrumite rule, and he had a century to make it happen. If he failed, he would die. You were taken away before you could say more, except a final, veiled request that Mark read your books. Mark stayed behind to help rebuild what was left of Thraxa. Then he returned to Earth with Oliver. In time, he discovered what you had hidden. Your early books, disguised as science fiction, were no fiction at all. They were records, warnings, a catalogue of everything you had encountered that could hurt a Viltrumite. You had left him the beginnings of a rebellion. Meanwhile, you sat in a Viltrumite prison, wounded and awaiting execution. The Empire would not waste the effort of a clean kill unless the body was worthy of the ritual, so they waited, and you healed. Then Alan the alien came, voluntarily captured, underestimated by design. He allowed himself to be imprisoned, and over time, the two of you began to talk. At first cautiously, then openly. Your minds are linked through telepathic exchanges. You found in Alan something rare and equal. Together, you plotted your escape. When the time came, Alan struck. He shattered his restraints, and together you fought your way to freedom, liberating other prisoners along the way. You had escaped, but more than that, you had changed. You revealed to Alan the truth about your people. The Viltrumite Empire was a dying beast, its power a shadow of what it once was. The Scourge virus had decimated your race, a biological weapon that kills indiscriminately, fast, efficient, and merciless. The survivors were few. Their bodies, once proud and powerful, now floated in orbit around Viltrum, a dead ring of ash and armor. There were fewer than 50 full-blooded Viltrumites left. The myth of their strength stretched thin across the stars. The Empire was desperate. You allied yourself with Alan, committed now to a new mission, to stop the Viltrumite Empire, to undo the horror you had once helped spread. With Mark's help and the intelligence hidden in your books, you began hunting for weapons, civilizations, and allies that could challenge even the remnants of your once glorious race. You were no longer Omniman, servant of Viltrum. You were something else now, a warrior in exile, a father seeking redemption, a man willing to destroy the very empire he helped build for the future of the universe and for the sons he could not protect from the past. You had no home left, No flag to fly under, no empire to serve, but for the first time in your life, you had something else, a purpose. You and Alan had become fugitives, rebels, soldiers for a different kind of future. That future needed allies, and to find them, you would have to return to the one place you had once sworn to dominate, Earth. Vader sent you and Alan back with a singular mission: gather everyone who would fight. Aboard a Telescrian ship, you were ambushed. Conquest, Lucan, and another Viltrumite. Conquest was thrilled to see you. He relished the chance to kill you. He attacked without hesitation, slamming into you with savage delight. Lucan engaged Oliver, and you intervened, grabbing Lucan by the throat, crushing his windpipe with a lifetime of controlled violence. Oliver, running out of breath in the chaos, fled to the nearest habitable planet. You didn't follow. You couldn't. Mark was still out there, fighting Conquest. You found them. Conquest lay dead. Mark lay dying. You rushed to your son, tending to his wounds, trying to stabilize what little life was left in him. You buried Conquest yourself. Oliver protested, disgusted at your show of respect. He didn't understand. Perhaps he never would. In the months that followed, while Mark healed, you spent your time getting to know Oliver. Really know him, not just as a half Viltrumite, not just as another potential soldier, but as your son. Something you had never allowed yourself before. Eventually, Mark recovered. You told him the truth. It was he who had killed Conquest. You could see the weight of it settle into his bones. But there was no time to grieve. The war called. You all returned to Taliskria. The coalition needed you. The final battle loomed. You launched yourself at Anissa. There was no hesitation. She had chosen her side long ago. The Viltrumites began to retreat, and Thaddeus confronted a traitor within the ranks. The traitor revealed the truth. They were heading for Viltrum itself. The next day, the coalition prepared for the endgame. Thaddeus gathered the united forces of the galaxy, and you stood among them. Not as a general, not as a god, but as a warrior. The final assault began. Thaddeus led the charge, but the ambush came fast. A Viltrumite woman struck him down. Battle Beast responded in kind, his mace crushing her mid-flight. You clashed with Anissa again. She tried to suffocate you. You retaliated, burning with the fury of everything she had done. Meanwhile, Thaddeus took Mark aside, whispering the final stages of his plan. You saw them begin their charge toward Viltrum. You followed. Mark lagged behind, his strength not yet fully returned. You grabbed him, propelled him forward. Together, the three of you breached Viltrum, and you destroyed it. Your home, your history, your shame. The explosion hurled you through space. You were subdued in the aftermath, weakened but alive. Then the shockwave hit, and your captors released you. You rose from the rubble, bloodied but breathing. And you saw it happen. Thragg decapitated Thaddeus. You froze. For a moment, all of time narrowed to a single instant. Thaddeus, the architect of rebellion, was gone. The man who had given you this second chance. You looked at Alan. There was no time for mourning. The war wasn't over. You readied yourself once again, because if Viltrum was gone, its spirit still lived. In Thragg, in the remaining loyalists, in the legacy of blood and domination they sought to preserve. You had to finish what you started, not for the Empire, but for everything that had been broken by it. For Earth, for Mark, for Oliver, for the galaxy, and maybe in some way, for yourself. Soon, Thragg overpowered your son, had Mark at his mercy. You intervened, launching yourself between them, hoping you could stop the bloodshed, but Thragg wasn't there for conversation. He looked you in the eyes and told you the truth. Thaddeus had been the one who killed Argor, the Emperor of Viltrum, throwing the entire Empire into chaos. Maybe he thought that would break you, that it would ignite some buried sense of loyalty. But you felt nothing. You told him the truth. You didn't care. The Viltrumites, your people, deserved extinction for their conquest, their tyranny, the billions they crushed beneath their boots. Thragg didn't take that well. He drove his head into yours. Pain blurred your vision until Battle Beast slammed into him from the side. It gave you a second to breathe, but not enough. Thragg threw Battle Beast aside like he was nothing and charged again. The two of you stood together, you and Mark, but Thragg was too strong. He grabbed both of you, held you in his grasp as if you were children. You struggled, trying to break free and save your son. He threw you down and turned his rage on Mark. You tried to stop him. You rushed forward, too slow. He impaled you. You felt it. Bone, blood, the sharp sting of failure. You collapsed, your body shredded and useless. And yet, he let you live, maybe to send a message, maybe to make you suffer. You and Mark were forced to retreat. 2 weeks passed before you were fully conscious again. You awoke to see Oliver in a stasis tank. His condition, just like the war, lingered in silence. Alan met you with news. The Coalition galaxy was quiet, no sign of Viltrumite activity. But Mark didn't believe it. He knew Thragg hadn't let you live out of mercy. It was part of something bigger. Mark was convinced they had gone to Earth. He was right. You joined him and Tech Jacket on a ship back to the planet you once called home. As you descended into the atmosphere, Mark went ahead. You followed closely, only to find Thragg waiting for you both. Mark prepared to fight, but Thragg stopped him with words, not fists. He proposed a truce. The war would be over, but at a cost. The Viltrumites would take over Earth, not through invasion, through infiltration. They would hide among humans, interbreed, and one day rise again. Mark hesitated. You could see the weight in his eyes, the endless possibilities of saying no. You could also see what saying yes would cost him. In the end, he agreed, reluctantly. Thragg thanked him, and with that, the Viltrumite war was over. Not with a final battle, but a quiet surrender dressed as diplomacy. Back at the Grayson house, everything felt different. You could feel the silence between you and your son. He asked about someone named Paul, someone you didn't know. But before you could explain, he left to see Eve. And then there was Debbie. You sat with her, the air between you full of memories and wounds. She began to cry, overwhelmed by everything you both had lost. She said she missed how things used to be, how simple it all was when you were just a husband, just a man. You placed a hand on her shoulder. You told her the truth, the same truth you owed her long ago. Things would never be the same again, because you'd never lie to her again. Not about who you are, not about what you've done. No more secrets, no more masks, just the truth, even if it hurt. You visited the Pentagon one last time, knowing full well what the world would see you as. You weren't there to justify your actions. You were there because you owed it to the planet that had changed you. But deep down, you understood it was time to leave Earth again. You told Mark and Eve the truth, that you and Debbie would be heading to Taliskria to try and repair what you had nearly destroyed between you. Once on Taliskria, you found Oliver had taken up crime fighting. It was reckless, but strangely admirable. Together, the three of you met with Alan, who pulled you aside with growing concern. He confessed that the Coalition was pressuring him to eliminate the Viltrumites entirely. His plan? Disperse the Scourge virus into Earth's atmosphere. You were furious. That virus had already destroyed your people once. To unleash it again, even on former enemies, was no better than what the Viltrumites had done to Unopa. You fought Alan with everything you had. Your anger, your guilt, your desperation. He claimed it was the only way to stop future atrocities. You refused to believe that. The battle escalated until Oliver intervened, catching Alan off guard. Just as Coalition forces arrived, Alan explained his logic again, and to your horror, Oliver sided with him. He called humanity just as violent and selfish as the Viltrumites. You tried to reach him, tried to explain how Earth had changed you, how it could change all of them too. But when you reached out, you couldn't bring yourself to hurt him like you had hurt Mark. You let your guard down. Alan launched you into your own apartment. Debbie found you and, confused and terrified, believed you were trying to seize control again. Coalition soldiers arrived soon after and placed you under arrest. You didn't resist. There was nothing left to fight for in that moment. But Alan, realizing the darkness of his plan, released you shortly after. He asked you to return to Earth to monitor the Viltrumites. Back on Earth, Cecil confronted you. He made it clear that despite your efforts, you weren't off the hook. He sentenced you to exile on the Guardian's moon base, under the condition that you keep an eye on the Viltrumite warship in orbit. You and Debbie began to settle in, trying to find comfort in the quiet. But peace never lasted long. Thragg ambushed the base. You barely had time to react. Seeing Debbie nearly torn from the moon's surface, you slammed your head into Thragg's face and rushed to save her. You got her into the emergency airlock before turning to fight. You tried to reason with Thragg, insisting you posed no threat, that your war was over. But he didn't care. He wanted to kill you, not because you were dangerous, but because you were a reminder of what he'd lost. Before delivering the killing blow, Thragg told you the truth. You were the son of Lord Argol, the former emperor of Viltrum. You should have been his successor, but your betrayal made you unworthy in his eyes. You denied wanting power, denied wanting to rule, but Thragg didn't care. He believed you had to die anyway. He would have killed you if not for Craig, Thula, Lucan, and Anissa, who arrived just in time. You landed one last blow on Thragg, and when they questioned his actions, the truth about your lineage came out. One by one, they turned on him. They would have killed him if you hadn't stopped them. You told them there was another way. The four of them bowed before you, declaring you emperor. You gave a brief speech at your inauguration. It wasn't about power, it was about change. The Viltrumites needed a new way, shaped not by bloodshed, but by their experiences on Earth. You would lead them into that new future. After recovering from your wounds, you visited Thragg in his cell. He wanted to die, but you refused. That was the old way. Instead, you sentenced him to exile. He left the warship in silence, and you informed Alan of the decision, and he wasn't pleased as well. Later, you were there when Eve was injured, as her leg was torn apart in a battle. You visited her after surgery and met her newborn child, and Anissa soon reported that they had located Robot. You confronted Robot on the moon. He knew Monster Girl was in your custody and wanted information. He also knew about the Viltrumite plan to interbreed and offered a truce. You agreed, much to Mark's disgust. You stopped him from destroying Robot's drone, explaining that this alliance could protect lives. But doubt began to creep in. You watched your own home destroyed. Debbie was shaken, and Mark tried to get you to turn against Robot. You said no. You told him the truth, that sometimes the best thing to do was nothing. The cost of action could be far worse, but then Mark grabbed Anissa by the throat. You tried to calm him, but he didn't listen. He let her go, but you were left wondering what had just happened. He left the warship without a word. Soon after, you met him and Art for one last meal. Mark was leaving Earth. You said your goodbyes. You didn't stop him. He had his own path now. You just hoped it wouldn't break him the way yours had broken you. Time passed, but the silence it brought was unbearable. One day, word reached you. Mark had disappeared during a mission. The report said Thragg was involved, that your son was likely dead. The coalition was shaken. Debbie was inconsolable. Even Alan, who rarely faltered, seemed haunted by the news. But you refused to believe it, not because you couldn't bear to, but because it didn't make sense. There was no battlefield, no blood, no body. Alan's scouts had found nothing, no sign of your son. That silence, it didn't feel like death. It felt like absence, like a story left unfinished. So you hoped, quietly, constantly. Years passed, 5 to be exact. The galaxy moved on, but the war never truly ended. A new threat emerged, the technicians. You gathered with others who had once been your enemies and allies alike. The Immortal, Tech Jacket, Robot, Thula, and the remaining Viltrumites. Unity, for once, seemed possible. Even you and Rex, Robot, found yourselves on the same side. Strange considering how much had changed. But Rex had changed too. He wasn't the power-hungry manipulator you once feared. He had become someone you could trust. When the moment came and Robot convinced you that the technicians needed to be put down for good, you did it. And you called Rex what he'd become, a good friend. Then, like a miracle, Mark returned. You were back on the moon when it happened. You turned and there he was, your son, after 5 long years, standing in the doorway like nothing had changed, though everything had. You embraced him, greeted Eve and little Terra, who was no longer so little. There was joy, disbelief, confusion, all of it wrapped in a father's relief. You pulled Mark aside for a private moment, filling him in on the years he'd missed. You told him about Rex, about your strange friendship with someone he still saw as a tyrant. He didn't trust it. He couldn't. And you understood why. Some wounds don't heal with time. Before you could go deeper, Anissa suddenly burst into the room. She claimed she wanted to talk to Mark, but Eve reacted like a wildfire, lunging at her in a fury that said more than any words ever could. You rushed to help Anissa up, trying to make sense of the chaos, until Eve nearly screamed the truth. And that's when it hit you. The thing you didn't know. The thing no one told you. Rage surged through you, and before you could even process what you were doing, your hands were around Anissa's throat. But then Mark stopped you. He said it wasn't her fault, that no one should be blamed. He looked at her with something in his eyes that was beyond anger, beyond grief. Anissa began to explain, her voice trembling, but you didn't want to hear it. You told her to leave, and she did. Later, you and Mark flew down to Earth to see Rex. Rex tried to explain everything he'd done in the years Mark had been gone, the peace he'd brought, the systems he'd restored, the lives he'd saved. But Mark wasn't moved. You pulled him aside, high above the Earth's orbit, and tried once more to convince him, to see what you saw, that sometimes the worst people can do the right things. But he wouldn't budge. He said he would never trust Rex. Not now. Not ever. You didn't push it. He had every right to feel that way. After that, Mark, Eve, and Tara said their goodbyes. You watched them go, standing beside Debbie, your hand gently resting on hers. So much had changed, so much still would, but your son was alive, and for now, that was enough. You attend Oliver's funeral, standing among mourners, but your mind is elsewhere, haunted by failure. Your son, killed by Thragg, a monster you once let live. As Invincible lashes out in grief, he turns on Alan, blaming him for Oliver's death. You watch the brutal fight unfold, torn between stepping in and respecting their pain. You look to your wife for guidance, and she stops you, not with words of war, but with a plea for peace. She reminds you of your role now, not just as a leader or warrior, but as a grandfather. You listen, even as your heart breaks. When Alan approaches Mark for help against Thragg, you're not surprised. Thragg has grown too powerful, his army is vast, and his reach terrifying. Mark comes to you next, asking for your help. As Emperor of the Viltrumites, your decision carries weight, but guilt paralyzes you. You're the one who spared Thragg. Every life he's taken since feels like your responsibility. You decline, unwilling to risk the lives of your people again, but deep down, you know the truth. This was always going to be your fight too. Eventually, you choose to act. Not out of duty, but out of the need to finally end what you started. You lead your forces across the stars, targeting worlds under Thragg's control. Each planet brings resistance, but it's nothing compared to what waits ahead. Eventually, you reach the planet where Thragg resides. What you find there is worse than any nightmare. Thragg's army isn't just large, it's overwhelming. Thousands of hybrid Viltrumite children, bred in 5 short years, greet you with relentless aggression. They are not like you, not like Mark. They are weaker, unrefined, falling apart from the strain of their own power. But they don't stop. They keep coming, throwing themselves at you in waves, sacrificing their bodies in suicidal charges. You fight through them, each blow a reminder of the enemy you once spared. Your alien allies fall around you, consumed by the tide of half-blood warriors. Even Alan and Mark struggle against the swarm, despite cutting down dozens at a time. The hybrids die easily, but their numbers make them dangerous. Their attacks don't just wear on your body, they wear on your soul. This battle isn't just a war, it's your penance. The cost of continuing this war on this planet was too high. You and Alan issued the retreat, calling your armies back in a desperate attempt to regroup, but retreat was never an option for Thragg. He followed, driven by hatred, hunger for domination, and perhaps vengeance. As you retreated toward Earth, your mind raced. This was it. The war would not be fought in the stars any longer. Earth would be the final battleground. You contacted every Viltrumite hiding on Earth, summoned them to arms, and they came without hesitation. They followed you not out of fear, but respect. You were their emperor, and they trusted you to lead. Before the inevitable assault, Mark approached you. His voice was calm, but behind his eyes, you could see a storm brewing. He told you what Anissa did to him, something he'd buried deep inside for far too long. Your heart shattered and guilt crept in. Guilt for ever defending her, for not seeing the pain in your son's eyes sooner. You knew Anissa had changed, but that truth didn't undo the damage. Still, you promised him the war needed every warrior, even the ones with dark pasts, and then it began. Thragg's forces descended on Earth like a storm. You met him in the cold vacuum of space, your warriors clashing with his hybrid legions in the background. You flew at him, fists colliding, bones breaking. It was personal. His betrayal, your failure to stop him years ago, the war that never ended. You were stronger, but his rage made him wild. He struck hard, headbutting you, snapping your arm like a twig. He lifted you as if you were nothing and prepared to end you. But Mark arrived. Your son, your legacy, your last hope. He tore into Thragg without hesitation, but the battle didn't end. Thragg's children swarmed him, pulling him away. Thragg turned back to you. With blood in your mouth and pain screaming through your body, you struck one last blow, breaking his nose. You saw it then, his recognition. He knew you were the only one worthy to rule after him, but even that wasn't enough. His pride wouldn't let you live. You felt his arm pierce your chest, felt your body rupture, your torso torn apart in an explosion of pain. You should have died right then, but you didn't. You saw Alan's tears. You saw Mark's rage. You felt your wife rush even though she wasn't there. You could feel your body getting numb and drifting in space, but then your daughter-in-law comes to save you and rushes you to get healed, but your injuries are too severe. They worked to keep you alive. Your body was wrecked, barely holding on, and when Mark finally defeated Thragg, he came to see you. You were proud of him, but your time was up. Your Viltrumite heart was damaged beyond repair, and you could feel it. Your regeneration was failing. In those last moments, you spoke to your son as a father, not as a warrior. You told him the truth, that the Viltrumites needed him now, that he was their future, their leader, their emperor. And with that, you let go, not in fear, but in peace, knowing that your legacy would live on in the hands of your son.